Thank you very much for joining us today, Mr. Jeremy. There's another ridiculous case doing the rounds. A Turkish crime boss, a drug lord, sentenced to 16 years in prison. We can't deport him. His right to a family life, despite the fact that he did marry another woman back home in Turkey, as well as the wife he has here. Another example of why we need to leave the ECHR, do you think?
Well, I do. Look, I think it's a sick joke, isn't it? Your viewers would be disgusted to read of this story. You know, this is somebody who's committed serious crime here. He's actually been back home multiple times on holiday and to get married, and yet naive judges with our completely broken human rights laws have given this man a right to live in the UK. You know my view. I feel we've got to change this completely because it is just letting down the British public. And I would challenge anyone who disagrees with me to come on your show and explain how these human rights laws, like the ECHR, are actually working in the interest of the British people, because clearly they're not.
Well, I would argue that as well. This is an interesting case involving the ECHR. I'm actually quite keen to talk to you about some of the more domestic stuff that's happening, as it were. Labour have been putting prisoners who they've released into hotels. In migrant hotels now, we've got criminal hotels as well. But crime in general just feels like it's out of control, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that crime is out of control, that we're living through a crime wave, particularly for theft. You know, the authorities demean some crimes as low-level crimes like shoplifting or having your mobile phone nicked. But these are things that have a real effect on all of us. You will have stories, I have stories. We all know victims of these crimes. And it doesn't have to be like this. We shouldn't live in a country where there is a view that this is just the new normal. It doesn't have to be like this. What we've got to do is get the career criminals, the people who are responsible for a vast amount of these crimes, and lock them up for longer. There's a shocking statistic, Patrick, that 1 in 10 criminals are responsible for 50% of all the crimes. Wow. And since 2007, 50,000 of these hyper-prolific or career criminals have been convicted of 50 crimes each and still not been sent down. So what we can do is, if we can get these people off our streets, into prison for longer, there is the chance to massively reduce crime rates, particularly for things like theft, the everyday crimes that are ruining communities. And this isn't rocket science, it's common sense. Most people know this, but yet in Westminster, it's not happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the people will be shouting at their TV screens now, going, well, this started under the Conservatives, didn't it? Why wasn't more done about that? And we were left, weren't we, with overflowing prisons. So it's all very well and good saying, well, let's lock people up for longer. Where are we going to put them?
Well, the last government did build more prison places than its predecessors, but I think we've got to build more prisons. I want to build them faster and cheaper than we have in recent years. You know, today it costs 700 grand for every cell in a new prison. There must be a better way to do it than that. We've also got to get the 10,500 foreign criminals out of our prisons and back home to their own countries. And I've said that we should be using every lever of the British state to put pressure on those other countries to take back their own criminals. You know, don't give them foreign aid. Stop granting visas to these countries. We are not a small and irrelevant country. We can be putting pressure on those countries to take back murderers and paedophiles and rapists, get them out of our prisons, free up places so we can get these career criminals off our streets and into prison. And then the other thing we've got to do is get the whole court system working properly, because since COVID, there's this massive backlog in cases, people who are in prison, on remand, waiting to go to trial.
Let's talk about that, because justice needs to be seen to be done as well. People need to feel as though, so for victims of crime as well, that their perpetrator of their crime is going to find themselves in a court of law at some point relatively soon. And this did kind of start under lockdown, but also a bit before that as well, with the closing of several magistrates' courts, which did happen under the Conservatives. I believe David Cameron kind of initially set the ball rolling on that. So you want to see what? Nightingale courts, do you?
Yeah, so the lady who runs the judiciary, the Lady Chief Justice Baroness Carr, she said that there are 6,500 extra sitting days in which the courts could be sitting hearing cases in which they're not today. The Labour government have just said, well, they're going to increase the number of days by 2,000, but still means there's 4,500 days literally on the table waiting to go. And that's before you even do innovative things like Nightingale courts, having the courts sit 24/7. You remember during the riots earlier in the summer, well, the judiciary and the court system and the government were able to suddenly stand up courts late at night on a Sunday. Why aren't we doing that now? Because as you say, there are cases
for it, though.
I think they would be. You know, why wouldn't they? This is a massive failure at the moment of government and civil service. We could be so much better than this. If somebody was raped today, their case probably wouldn't come to court until 2027 or 2028, by which time, you know, recollections will have, you know, drifted, people may have left the country. It's going to be much harder to get convictions. And that's just wrong, isn't it? That is a massive scandal in our country. And yet you've got courts that are sat empty. You know, you've got judges literally petitioning the government to sit for longer hours and for more days every year. We can fix this. It doesn't have to be this way. And if we can do all these things, then we can free up places in our prisons and we can get the career criminals off our streets and into jail.
So that's your basket of measures there. Again, I'll emphasise Labour saying that they've got these 2,000 extra sitting days. You make the point that there are 6,000 and odd that need to happen. We've spoken a lot about injustice there. There's another injustice that I think has taken place today, and it's the waspy women, isn't it? Now, there is an economic case, absolutely, that Britain does not have £10 billion just going spare, and that we can't afford to give them exactly what they want. It's more about the lies, I think, is it not? From Labour, you've had Yvette Cooper, you've had Liz Kendall, who's actually in charge of this now, you've had Keir Starmer pledge his support, you've had a couple of others as well, previously say that they will back the waspy women and essentially give them what they want. And then last night it emerged that that wouldn't happen. How do you feel about that? Because the Tories didn't give them what they wanted either, did they?
Look, you can argue the merits of the case, and I think they are arguable. You can make the argument, as you just have, and I think actually it's the right one, that there just isn't the billions and billions available to provide the kind of compensation that these women would wish. But the big issue to me beyond that is the dishonesty. The fact that some politicians were willing to explain the trade-offs, be honest with the public that this isn't possible, but yet pretty much everyone in the cabinet, including Keir Starmer, when they were in opposition, were having their photo taken with waspy women, were tweeting, were going to rallies, were saying that they were going to fix this, that they were going to sort out this great injustice. Now they're in government, they've done precisely the opposite. And it's also a pattern with Keir Starmer. You know, this is a man who got elected as Labour leader on a set of promises, reneged on almost all of them when he's in office. And now, time and again, Rachel Reeves's budget, she's not going to raise taxes. She's just massively hiked taxes. You know, at every turn, they are telling lies. And I have not known a government that has lied and lied and lied in the way that this one has done in such a short period of time. It's massively harmful for trust in politics and in this government, because we're all left thinking, can we believe anything that Keir Starmer says?
Just on that, because there's a lot to go at here with Keir Starmer. You rattled off a few things. We do it regularly. I mean, we'll have just done, by the time this goes to air, we'll have just done a big segment on the waspy women at 10 p.m. And I'll be making the point that I do think it is an injustice what's taking place here, as well as the lies. But it does strike me that Cammy Badenoch doesn't seem to be able to land much of a glove on Keir Starmer at PMQs. And you must be sitting there, thinking you could have done a bit of a better job, are you?
Well, I watched her today and she was making the argument that I've just made, that this is a man who just doesn't seem like he's capable of telling the truth. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that is just immensely corrosive to trust in him, in the government. And then he's got sat next to him Rachel Reeves, you know, a chancellor who stood at the general election really on a read my lips, no more tax rises manifesto, has done precisely the opposite. And if you can't trust a chancellor, then that is very harmful, because you've got investors, you've got businesses, you've got farmers, you know, you've got people who rely on the word of the chancellor, and that word doesn't seem to mean very much right now.
Just one last one on this issue of lying. Again, I know there'll be certain people shouting at their TV sets saying, well, what about the likes of Boris Johnson? If the Tories got a great track record when it comes to the truth, really?
Well, look, I would argue that these people have only been in power for 5 months, and yet their manifesto has already, you know, fallen to pieces. You know, we used to mock the Edstone, but I think we wish that, you know, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea after all, because every one of the manifesto pledges of this Labour government seems to have disappeared already.
Last time I checked, the Edstone is in a pub garden in Kensington. So there we go. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patrick. Good to see you.
All the very best. That's Robert Jenrick there.